We, the jury, upon our oaths of law and evidence in this case, find the defendant not guilty of involuntary manslaughter as charged in count 6 of the indictment. Do you want the jury pooled?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the community in court, thank you so much for doing your civic duty. You're all free from admonitions and instructions. Everyone could have a seat. Mr. Grubb, Mr. Grubb, you're. Mr. Grubb, you're hereby discharged. What? Yes, that's fine. Are we going to get a deputy assistant for the jurors?
Yes.
Dan, thank you.
jury comprised of citizens from right here in Franklin County indicted this defendant, meaning that they found probable cause that he should be criminally charged and that this case should proceed to trial. And the family members of Takaya Young and her unborn child deserved to have a jury hear the evidence in this case and make a determination as to whether or not the defendant, the officer in this case, his use of deadly force was justified or was it not. And their verdict today spoke to that. They've made their decision, and whether or not the state agrees with it is irrelevant. It's the jury's decision. They spoke to that, and it's always been a matter of the citizens of Franklin County through their jury to determine what is and what is not an acceptable use of deadly force in their community.
Can you talk to me about maybe those who weren't following the whole trial, the difficulty of your role as a special prosecutor to come in here and try this case?
Well, you know, it's never easy first off to come into a court in a county that you're not familiar with. Obviously, the judges, the defense counsel, everything that goes along with that. But more importantly, you know, it never brings pleasure, certainly to a prosecutor, to be prosecuting a police officer for criminal charges. But that's how our system works, and that's our job as special prosecutors, was essentially to come in here and make sure the jury got a full presentation of the evidence and the facts, a fair presentation of what the facts were in this case, so that they could make an informed decision, and that's what they did.
Dan, there were a lot of emotions in that room from everybody, both sides and the jury. Seeing those emotions, it had to have been hard for you guys as well. What did you think of all the emotion in the room?
You know, it's an emotionally charged case. It's a difficult case, I think, from both sides, obviously, for the families from both sides of things. And unfortunately, at this time, I've not yet had a chance to sit down with Takaya's family and to get their, you know, their thoughts, obviously their emotions. Certainly, I'm confident to say they're disappointed in the verdict. And I'll have that conversation with them, but there's no surprise there's emotions involved, as there should be. They've lost, you know, their daughter, their granddaughter, family member, who's not going to come back.
And when you have that conversation with them, how are you going to approach this and talk to them?
Well, I'm not going to share that in public. That's a conversation that I'm going to have with them in private, out of respect for them.
Every case is different. Will you guys get a chance to speak with the jurors in this case?
Counsel's not speaking with the jurors in this case. As you probably noticed, the jury was emotional when the verdicts were read. So they've gone through, I've lost track, a 3-week trial, and we certainly thank them for the dedication that they put in for these 3 weeks, these long days, and not only listening to and considering the evidence, but their deliberation. So it's been emotional for the jurors as well. We've gone through 3 days of deliberation. That tells you it wasn't an easy decision for them as to whether this was justified or not.
Can you talk a little bit about the strategy of using his statement in your case, potentially keeping him off of the stand, and what, you know, maybe a different strategic decision he would have been on the stand and that could have influenced the case? Is that something you guys have thought about?
Well, you know, strategy goes into it to a certain extent, but more importantly, wanting the jury to have a full concept of what the facts in the case were. That's the most important thing to the state of Ohio, is to not to be hiding evidence. We wanted them to have the defendant's statement, whether or not he took the stand. And that was important for us to put in front of them.
Is there anything else you guys want to add?
I don't have anything further.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Appreciate it.
Safe travels back.
Thank you.
Sean, are you ready?
Sean, are you ready? Are you waiting for the family?
You can come behind this side, that way. There's a little ways of.
We obviously can understand the family's emotions based on Grandma's reaction in court.
You know, it's heartbreaking. I mean, I think we all felt that emotion in real time.
and that was the culmination of what they have dealt with for over 2 years. The heartbreak of knowing what happened initially and believing for years that justice would be served, and just understanding how hard it is to convict a police officer in this country. The burden is high for murder already. It's even higher when an officer is involved, and it's also heartbreaking because what it does is it normalizes behavior like what Connor Grubb exhibited that day, and that is not normal behavior. We look at these recent killings, these recent police killings in Columbus, and you have officers who have an unreasonable and irrational fear with no weapons involved, or folks doing very minimal behavior that they escalate into a murder. It's not normal behavior. It's not something that should be normalized. It is something that I believe that police officers don't want to see normalized because it's just not justifiable. And so what this did was it set an example of a situation that could be deemed to be justified in the future. And I think we all agree that this is a tragedy that should never have happened. Connor Grubb was a trained officer that day. Takaya Young had a gun placed in her face, and she had a split-second decision to make. And I cannot say what I would do in that situation, but I can say Connor Grubb also struggled in a split-second situation with years of training. And so we have to have de-escalation. We cannot have officers who pull a gun in a petty theft situation. 2 lives were lost. It's not just about Takaya. It's an unborn daughter that does not get to step foot on this earth. And you have sons who grew up without their mother, and it's just heartbreaking. My hope is that we all understand that there cannot be 2 justice systems in America. We just cannot have it that way. We have to have accountability that looks the same for everybody, no matter what uniform you're wearing, no matter what color you are. We have to understand that wrong is wrong. And it's just heartbreaking to know that the family has to deal with this in this moment. But we'll keep fighting. You know, we have a civil suit that is ongoing, and we'll keep pushing forward.
How does this verdict impact your civil suit?
It doesn't. I mean, the burden in the civil suit is lower, and I have no doubt that we will meet that burden. No doubt about that whatsoever. But, in this moment, that doesn't bring the family any solace. I mean, they're not thinking about the civil part. I mean, they wanted him to go to jail, to go to prison. And so, we'll push forward, and civil cases afford us a bit more opportunity to dig into the systemic things that happened here, and to really ensure that across the board we can make sure that these incidents don't happen again. But we're pushing forward. It's active, and we're ready to go.
It's important to understand that this is a criminal finding. This isn't a moral finding. This isn't a civil finding. Takaya and her daughter should be alive today. And as Attorney Walton said, we shouldn't live by 2 different standards or 2 different set of rules for two different sets of people. Connor Grubb's a professional. Takaya Young was a civilian. We expect her to act a particular way in a particular circumstance, but we don't expect Connor Grubb to exhibit the same level of professionalism. So this fight will continue, as Attorney Walton said. In the civil court, we will hold them accountable by any means we can, and we will continue trying to seek justice for this family. This family is devastated. Candidly, we are as well, but we're not exhausted. The fight will continue. We'll continue to push forward to get justice for this family.
Sean, every morning we saw you guys gather out there and pray. How important is faith to you guys right now in this moment?
It's kept Miss Nadine going throughout this time. I think every interview she's given, she's talked about her faith in God and believing that things will work out in their favor. And so the hope is that they can find the meaning in this. I mean, I think in this moment it's tough because what we see is, even beyond this family, I mean, there are people throughout this country that witnessed what happened. There are police officers who witnessed what happened that believe that it's wrong. And so, again, I think it's a tragedy. It's an American tragedy, truly. It's the first time that we've had an officer indicted for killing a pregnant woman on duty. And my hope is that it's the last time it happens. Unfortunately, the result does not lend itself to holding officers accountable and ensuring that they think twice.
How does this affect your outlook on some of the other cases going on in Franklin County, specifically Franklin County Sheriff Deputy Jason Mead and Ricky Anderson as well?
Yeah, our hope is that, we'll get a set of jurors on those cases that will see the tragedy in those cases as we hope they would have seen in this case. Jason Mead's case is coming up, and then Officer Anderson's case is coming up, and the Donovan Lewis case as well. We've had a conviction, fortunately, in one of these cases, Adam Coy. We had a conviction, and we're hopeful that the truth of that case will bleed over into these other cases. Unfortunately, it didn't happen here. We respect the jury and their consideration. We're disappointed. We don't believe the evidence should have led them to this result, but we have a system of justice in this country and we have to follow it. But we're confident that the next round, when we deal with Mead and Anderson, moving forward, that there will be justice found in those cases as well.
I know you spoke to the family right before. What did you tell them? What did they tell you?
I think, they believed that there would be a conviction. I mean, up until the moment that the words were read, there was no doubt that there would be a conviction. And so I could see the energy kind of deflate out of, both Miss Nadine and, Mr. Tim, Takaya's father. And you heard the frustration out there. Candidly, my daughters knew about this case, and they're 7 and 9 years old. And that part is heartbreaking.
Yeah, folks, we need to have a real conversation about policing in this country, not just in this community, but how we as a community view police officers and law enforcement. Unfortunately, what I believe happened here is that there tends to be a default when it comes to law enforcement, because we're taught that we need law enforcement for every single thing, when the reality is perhaps we need to reevaluate the way we police communities, certainly the way we police communities of color. Because what we found disproportionately is that when it comes to people of color are shot and killed, not given the grace of any sort of a relief from these officers. So we need to have a real conversation about what it means to police in America, what it means to police in this community, and what it means to police when it comes to black and brown folks in this country.
Are you worried about how the community is going to reflect on this? Are you worried about riots? Are you worried about?
Yeah, I will say this, and I'm not going to speak for Attorney Walton, but I don't like to direct people on how to conduct themselves when it comes to issues like this. When you live in communities that are impacted by law enforcement in a way which this case shows, I don't think it's fair to judge those communities. So I'm not going to sit here and tell the community how they should conduct themselves. I understand what I'm supposed to say here today, which is everybody be peaceful and pray and kind of take their time. But the reality is we're feeling the same way that they're feeling. I've got 2 sons. Like Sean said, he's got 2 daughters. They have to grow up in this world, and we have to teach them a whole different standard when it comes to if they run into the police. We see our children in Takaya's case. So respectfully, I'm not gonna presume to judge the community on how they conduct themselves.
And I'll say, I think rioting is doing the community a disservice. I believe there will be systemic change. I believe there will be an informed community that understands the system and understands what we're up against. Jurors don't get paid a lot. They don't have child care. Many times, folks who would bring a different perspective are not on the jury. I think we saw 3 black jurors dismissed by the defense in this, and there was no reasoning stated. So we're already at a deficit in terms of who's actually considering the facts here, and who's bringing a different perspective into the jury room during those deliberations. And so, again, understanding the system, you can prevent this from happening in the future in a different way. And so I think what we see 4 officers who are facing a jury for their actions on duty for killing people, and that's different. That's progress that we have not had before. We're seeing transparency more and more. I believe what happened here was very transparent, and so it goes beyond rioting. It goes to understanding the systems at play. Those who come in and defend these bad officers in those moments, and normalize that behavior. I think they should also feel some shame there, because they know how they feel about the shooting as well, for sure.
Talk about kids and the impact on this case. We saw the family bring Takaya's 2 sons to court yesterday. They didn't stay very long, but we then saw some commenting online about they wanted the jury to see the kids. who's they? I mean, that it feels a little performative. What was the purpose in having them here? And
Yeah, so I can't tell anybody how to act in that moment, you know? I mean, if somebody close to me was killed and my family experienced that throughout this process, I would want them to know this is what the system looks like. This is what accountability, this is what being held accountable looks like. And so I would certainly, you know, just understand that for them, they don't know what happened to their mom outside of a police officer took her life, and it was unjust. And I'm sure they've heard for 2 years now that there will be justice. And so I don't think it was performative. I don't think it was meant to you know, bring out any emotion. I mean, you can't be any more emotional than what was already taking place. I mean, a baby was killed. We saw autopsy photos of a baby. And so there's no need to bring any more emotion out here. And honestly, I mean, they showed restraint throughout, you know, that time. They did not try to do anything to influence this process at all. So, you know, I have nothing but respect for them. My heart goes out to those boys because their experience with the system is not a very kind one, and they'll have to live with that for a while.
Anything you want to say to the jury?
No, I mean, the jury didn't do anything wrong here. Connor Grubb is the one who pulled the trigger. Connor Grubb is the one who has us all here right now. Again, many folks try to point out Takaya's actions, and I think, again, normalizing what untrained, scared citizens, we have no understanding of their mental capacity, how fast they react to commands. You have one person shouting at her right here. You have a gun pointed in your face right here, and you don't know why because you're talking to this person right here. And so, you know, she did not press the gas in that moment. She clearly did not want to harm him, but I think his intent showed from the time he came up and pulled the gun that he was going to harm her. He was going to shoot her if he had to do so. And for some reason, he believed he had to do so despite the fact that she was being calm and talking to his partner, who also was shocked at the gunshot. That's the one that's reasonable. That's the one who, you know, should be judged by that standard right there because he understood, I'm going to talk to her, use my de-escalation tactics that I've been trained to utilize. And I just, you know, don't understand how we can normalize this officer making a decision to take a life with her trying to avoid him at a slow speed.
You guys have talked about this case in the cosmos of policing in the Black community. You're both Black parents. Will this verdict inform any conversations you're having with your kids tonight and moving forward?
We have conversations all the time, and I'm not going to speak for Sean, but my sons are aware of what I do, but we try to keep them shielded as long as possible as we can from the realities of being, in my case, a Black male in this country. But I know the day is going to come when they're going to have a conversation that says, you need to conduct yourself a certain way just so you survive this encounter with law enforcement. And when it comes to being Black in America, and when it comes to policing in Black America, there's two different sets of rules. We're told not to jump to conclusions, but I can't help but wonder if Takaya would have been a white woman, how would he have conducted himself in that particular scenario? Would he have shown her the grace that Takaya and her child deserve? That's the question that we're all left with because Takaya is not here to answer those questions either. Her child's not here to live a full life. She leaves behind 2 sons, so who also unfortunately would have to have those conversations as well. So we really need to reevaluate the conversations we're having, and respectfully, what we would ask moving forward, you know, there's a lot of media coverage, and there's a lot of coverage of the theft portion of this case, and we understand it can be sensational at times, but the reality is stealing liquor at a grocery store doesn't mean a death warrant. It shouldn't mean a death warrant, and if we're going to be the type of country we want to be, the way we treat people who even are accused of crimes says a lot about who we are as a country. So unfortunately, you know, I will have those conversations at some point, hopefully not soon, but it's inevitable when you're living the Black experience in this country.
I couldn't help but notice both of you kind of stopped, get emotional as you've been speaking to us, swallow a little bit. You spent a lot of time with this family. Is there anything that you want to say to them? I'm sure you'll say it, but is there anything you want the community to know?
Yeah, that we all know the truth and that we're fighting for them. You know, it is emotional in so many ways. You know, to answer your question, my daughters will probably cry when they hear the news because you cannot shield them from, the realities of what happens. And this one has always been tough because not only was she a woman, but she was pregnant. And while they're taking in the reality of what happens too many times, to internalize that, to know that, these little girls could have that same fear, they're going to take it hard. I'm not quite sure what I'm going to say. A few years ago, my daughter asked if the mean man that did what he did to Casey is going to come get her. These are things that too many communities are having to internalize and process and wonder if you'll be next. And will there be any justice for what happens to you? And I think that's also why, Robert and I fight these cases, because unfortunately, when people don't take the time to assess, to consider the situation, it could be me next, it could be Robert next. I have a suit on right now. If I look otherwise, who knows how I'll be treated? And so it's important that we figure out how we all talk about this stuff, right? To Robert's point, to normalize and to talk about the theft when there's a murder that also took place. Those two things aren't even in time contextually. There's a reason why that encounter happened, but Moynihan is what the reaction was to the theft. Grubb came up and pulled his gun out because he saw his partner talking to a woman at the car, and she wouldn't get out the car, so he pulled his gun out. That's just not normal behavior. Yeah.
And to the family, what I would say is, and they know this, we're with you, and we're going to be with you, and just like all the other families we represent, we take these cases because they mean something to us. We live in the same country, we live the same experience. So when we go home, we can't leave these cases at the office because we live them, and they mean more to us because of what it means to our children, to our family. Like Sean said, this could be a suit or no suit, because the reality is when you're black in this country, you're looked at as a threat when you should be given some grace to just live in this country.
And just full circle, four black people killed. One thought some keys or a phone was a gun. Another hunted someone and shot him in the back going into his home with AirPods in. Another was shot instantaneously when the door opened. He had a vape. And so again, we're criminalizing things that are not criminal to the extent that the force is used. And I think that's the whole point of training. It's the point of de-escalation, cultural training, all these things. And there's some patterns that are emerging in these cases across the board that we'll point out in our civil cases and see to point out to you all. But our goal is to stop those patterns. We don't like being here. I got other cases I could be working on that, my goal is that we're not doing this work anymore. We don't want to do civil rights work, despite what some folks may try to say about trying to get paid off these cases. I guess he walked out, but no, it's not about that. We're doing what has to be done because other folks will step up and have the same courage to speak to what's wrong.
Who were you just looking for?
Brian Steele.
You've talked about the need for training. Have any conversations happened with the FOP, with any law enforcement agencies at this point for more training?
My experience in dealing with the FOP is that's a dead end. You have to understand, this is a profession that's operating the way it intends to. This is a profession that's operating the way it was set up to, which just brings me back to my initial point. We need to talk about how we police in this country. And I'm not willing to give any level of grace to what our folks are going through, because there's communities of color that can't just live, that just can't exist. And shoplifting in a Kroger should not mean a death sentence. A pregnant woman in a car should not be seen as a threat. That's just not acceptable. So, and I know Attorney Walton's had more dealings with the FOP, but respectfully, in my experience, this is a profession and this is a culture that's operating exactly how it intends to. So we will seek to get those reform measures. If they don't want to do it willingly, we'll seek to force them in federal legislation and policy, whether that means getting the right elected officials, to getting the right people in the rooms to negotiate these collectively bargained contracts in a way that respects the communities that vote for them, We'll do whatever is necessary, but the fight, we're not going to stop because we can't. Because the reality is, if we stop, people that look like us continue to die, and that's not acceptable.
And honestly, what's difficult is that the FOP, they don't actually represent the majority of police officers. They say they do because they're the police union, but you see time and time again, they speak out for the bad apples, so to speak. The folks who are doing good work, who, deserve that representation, I think, they'd rather get out and try to make a stand despite what the facts show. And so it makes it difficult. We can't negotiate with terrorists.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
so much. Appreciate it.
It's Sean Walton, the attorney for the family of Takaya Young, speaking about the jury's verdict. He said he called it an American tragedy. The family wanted Grubb held accountable. They wanted him to go to jail. Walton's legal partner also saying that the evidence should not have led to this decision. He said there needs to be a real discussion about policing in America and that police reform is needed. He said there were two different sets of rules for two different people. And the family will now be filing a civil suit to make sure these things do not happen again. Well, the jury reaching not guilty verdicts in the trial, the murder trial of Blendon Township Police Officer Connor Grubb. They came back with not guilty verdicts, not guilty to 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter, 2 counts of murder, and 2 counts of felonious assault. Grubb shot and killed Takaya Young 2 years ago outside of a Kroger on Sunbury Road. FOP President Brian Steele, by the way, is expected to talk next, and as soon as he steps up to the podium, we'll go to him live. It was a jury made up of 8 women and 4 men. They reached a verdict earlier today, maybe about an hour ago, in the weeks-long trial of Grubb. We have the defense attorneys up right now. Mark Collins, let's listen in.
Justice was whatever those 12 people decide in the jury room. And I've said the exact same thing when I've been on the other side of this. We've been on the other side of this. So we put our jurors in an impossible situation with these types of cases. So we're thankful for the effort, but you saw the emotion they had. You saw the pain that we placed them in this situation. And really, it's uncalled for. And what I mean by that is our system is set up that when you indict a police officer with an expert at the grand jury level, and you start from that premise, of course you're going to get a charge. So I'm speaking in general now, you guys, and I hope you don't mind my soapbox, but the grand jury system has to change, our legislature has to change. To try to indict an officer on felony murder is unconscionable. And I understand reckless homicide, I understand other aspects, and if an officer purposefully does something, absolutely, then the charge with murder. But the way this process goes right now, we need our legislatures, we need our elected officials to step up. But on behalf of Connor and his family, they thank all the jurors for their service. They thank, for putting the effort in and the time, and you saw their emotion as well. For the rest of his life, he has to deal with this, and he, trust me, you didn't get to hear from him because the government put his statement on, but he feels he took a life and on duty and realized another's life after the fact, and to walk around with that and that is a difficult situation. In terms of the other stuff, I was able to hear some of the civil attorneys. Look, they have a job to do. I get it, but what's happening is they're tainting potential jurors. They're tainting the jury pool in Franklin County. And again, we have to change the process for our change of venue stuff. We have to have a fair situation here. So again, we're very thankful for the service of the jurors, and it's an impossible situation that they're put in. We believe that they followed the law and they followed this. The bottom line, ladies and gentlemen, is no matter what you say from any angle, a car was used towards a Blendon Township police officer, and he had to react, and so that's the society that we live in. And this isn't a racial case; it has nothing to do with any aspect of that. But that's the bottom line of the situation. It's just not that complicated in terms of this. So.
You guys concerned about some of the issues that were brought up in court, the body-worn camera video being played out, and the family's emotional reaction during that, and at the end of rebuttal, some of the statements by the special prosecutor. Did you fear that was going to harm the jury in their decision making?
Well, from a defense standpoint, you have to protect the record, and so in that aspect, those types of things, Do I want to bring those to light? Do I want to put those out there? No. I mean, how am I going to tell a family that lost a loved one and a potential granddaughter of how they're supposed to feel in that? But unfortunately, we have to have some sort of decorum in the courtroom. We have to have those processes. So when I probably, in however many trials I've done, I've probably objected maybe 5 or 6 times in a closing. But again, there's certain points that, and what I'm speaking of is there's certain points in these cases that it's easy to cross the line if you're the prosecutor. It's easy to cross the line if you're a defense attorney because it's so nuanced and the case law is so difficult. But that's where our legislature has to step in. Our state legislature has to step in and come up with jury instructions that are vetted, that go through things. Every time in these cases, any judge that has one of these has to, in fact, create jury instructions. And they're case specific. But our legislature has to step in as well as our elected officials to prevent this type of situation. And I think you were going to say something, Caitlin, or good?
You guys have spent a lot of time with Connor, and I assume his family as well. So in that moment when the judge was reading the verdict, you guys just spoke with them. What was it like for them?
It's a relief. I mean, they've lived this every single day for the last 2 years as well, and so they're relieved that justice was served.
From day one, Connor Grubb has 2 young children. Connor Grubb from day one said, why can't I testify at grand jury? Why can't I tell them what happened? Because he said, I don't understand why. And unfortunately, we told him, you're going to get indicted. Okay, and he couldn't comprehend that in his mind because of the type of person he is, because his entire life has been dedicated to serving his country in the Marines. He was deployed twice. He was deployed twice in the Marines. He has 2 little children. His wife is a part-time teacher. This is what they do, and that's what he did at Blendon Township. And so it's very difficult for him to sit in a chair when you have an expert like Seth Stoughton, who has never testified on behalf of a police officer, telling you that you shouldn't stand in front of a car, and that therefore you're guilty, and therefore you're going to prison for a life sentence with 15 years to the parole board.
But we knew the writing was on the wall, which is what the point was.
What did Officer Grubb say? Has he said anything about staying on as a police officer, continuing this work?
That part is personal right now. What he told us is thank you so much, and he started to cry, and so did his wife, and they have other things to say, but that's between them, and they're going to need some time on this.
Have they talked about his plans for the future now?
We haven't talked to them about that. It's
one day at a time.
Yeah, it's one day at a time. If it's a not guilty verdict and your life goes on, you're always affected. Like we said in this case, everyone in that courtroom is affected from this, and it will impact them for the rest of their lives. But how do you talk about what you're going to do in the future when you might be going to prison for a life sentence with no chance of parole 15 years, or you're walking out the door? So, those types of things are difficult, and in time, I'm sure they will. But they wanted us to express their thanks to the community, to the support that they've gotten, and they understand the other side. They understand the frustration, the sorrow, and the pain that Ms. Young's family feels, and it's real. So.
Are you have security concerns at all? I mean, there are extra deputies outside the courtroom. I know there's been some comments here and there. Are you concerned at all that there's going to be issues related to Emmy's family?
Let me answer that question. Because we're involved in these types of cases and there's been issues in other cases, we're always trying to prepare for that. And that's where I think that the FOP and the support system and officers who are retired officers here supporting them, that's the kind of security that they need and stuff like that. And your question, Bethany, I'd like to go to a different level. It's difficult nowadays in a courtroom when people have a right to protest. People have a right to get a permit and do their stuff. But when you're sitting right next to jurors who are waiting for a ride home, when you're all in other areas and stuff like that, again, it places everybody in a difficult situation, because both sides, all 3 sides, the judge, the prosecution, and the defense, they just want a fair trial. And so what happens is, because these are such emotional cases, and because the feelings run so deep, that people end up acting a certain way and doing a certain way sometimes that maybe they wouldn't do in a normal type case and stuff like that. So that's the hard part in these types of cases.
You guys will be back about the need for change, but what do you think this verdict means for future cases that you guys are a part of involving officers?
I mean, I just really think it's case by case basis. So I don't think that this sends a message to any of the other cases or anything like that. As you know, everything is case specific. So I mean, I'm hopeful. It has restored my faith in the Franklin County jury system, that jurors can actually follow the law, and so that's what we'll be pushing here on out.
And type of change we're talking about is big picture. Type of change is those special prosecutors every day of their lives prosecute criminal defendants, and they work with law enforcement officers. So they're put in a hard situation. We're put in a hard situation. We represent criminal defendants every day of our lives. 90% of our practice is on the other side. And so the situation is such that in federal court, they're appointed for life. So if the parties agree to waive a jury, you try this. These are legal issues. I hope you guys see that. This is a legal case of whether or not the Graham factors were met more likely than not and stuff like that. So when you have normally a legal issue, you waive jury and you try it to the judge. You can't try it to a judge in elected county like in the city of Columbus, Franklin County. So my request for change in the system is bring in a visiting judge or a retired judge who doesn't have to face a re-election or doesn't have to face the wrath of the community one way or another. Bring in special prosecutors who are retired, again, who don't have any alignment. And there needs to be a checks and balance system at the grand jury system. That's what we're learning here, and there's a frustrating part, and no one hears us or listens to us. And we're not trying to make this case this. Ms. Stevens is absolutely right. Every single case in and of itself is different, and we just, the law is, I think you heard the jury instructions, for those of you who were in there. There is no formula, a precise definition of reasonableness. There is no these types of things. That's the only definition in our criminal justice system where they don't have a definition. They don't give you the guidance and the roadmap. We thought that the Supreme Court case of
Barnes v. Felix
was going to give us more of a roadmap and stuff, because I would have reversed it. That's why she had to fill it. I would have said it the wrong way. Was going to give us direction and stuff, but it's not. And so the other dilemma that you have, ladies and gentlemen, on these is you have nationally accepted policing procedures and stuff like that. After all the trials I've done this, I still have no idea what that is. Every single police force, I mean, I'm sure Mr. Steele can tell you how many police forces there are just in Central Ohio. They train a certain way, they do a certain thing. So when you have a Blenheim Township thing, a provision, and you have training in Ohio that's OPATA, and it's specifically for that, but yet you're allowed to bring in an expert that comes in and opines on training that they've never done, or they've never done anything. And again, they're entitled to their opinion, but those are the types of guidance that we need from the legislature and from. There's commissions that work on jury instructions all the time. There's a ton of work goes into that, into the Ohio jury instructions, and that's what we need, and that's what, hopefully that people hear this, and more importantly, the elected officials of each county, the county prosecutors here. We've worked with county prosecutors in other parts of the state, ladies and gentlemen. They don't take it to an indictment right away. We've had elected officials in a southern portion of the state hire two different experts. Both experts gave an opinion, sat down with those, and then was able to resolve the case because that prosecutor educated him or herself to the complexities of the law, to the aspects of this and what is required. Anybody can go into grand jury and get an indictment against a police officer for probable cause because use of force was used and someone died as a result. But shouldn't be the starting point. The starting point should be, hey, what does the law say? Let us educate and then give it a fair presentation to the grand jury.
On Mr. Stoughton, why bring up the rate by professor reviews? Because the website even admits that they can't really verify every single review that is posted there.
You have to understand with Professor Stoughton, he holds himself out as an expert. So his entire, what he posts on anything or what is posted about him and everything, that's all proper stuff for cross-examination. So that's the purpose of cross-examination. So
I feel like it goes directly towards his bias.
Right.
I mean, you saw that chart, the 15 cases that he's only ever testified against police officers for. And then you have these students, alleged students, who spend time with him, who know he was a police officer for only 5 years and are calling him not an expert in police self-defense. Those who can't don't, and those who can do, those who can't teach, and that's exactly what he is.
Anybody else?
Anything else you guys want to add?
No, and I don't ever do this enough, and I apologize, but I want to thank all you guys. You do a very fair job and very fair coverage, and your job is very difficult, and sometimes we're allowed to talk to you and sometimes we're not, but I appreciate your professionalism. I'm not sure why you give so much attention to the civil case when this is a criminal case, but that's up for you guys to decide. We don't show up on the civil cases and the civil things and, have press conferences there, but again, not for me to say, but we thank you all for your professionalism and things of that nature. Thank you.
Thank you for your help the last week. Maybe we should start with this.
That was defense attorney Mark Collins thanking the jury for their service, but at the same time saying the whole grand jury system has got to change to indict a police officer on felony murder. He said it was ridiculous. It needs to be changed. Here's Brian Steele, the FLP president.
I will put out a written statement in the next 10 minutes, and then we'll just questions and answers. So you heard me say this before. Justice is a process. Justice is not an outcome. Justice was served today. This verdict reaffirms what we have been saying from day one. This incident was tragic, but it was preventable. Let me make that clear. It is tragic, but it was preventable. Had Ms. Young followed officers' instructions, had she would have obeyed the commands, she likely would not have escalated this situation. Ms. Young was loved. There is no doubt about that. I do not think Ms. Young was a bad person. I think she was a 21-year-old woman who made a terrible, terrible mistake. That mistake started when she chose to shoplift. It escalated when she ignored the store security and when she ignored the officer's commands and struck the officer with a car. Again, do not think she's a bad person, just a series of bad decisions that forced the officer to fire. I appreciate that the jury actually applied the law here, and instead of the snake oil that some of these so-called experts were trying to sell, the jury clearly wasn't buying that. We apply the law. That is it. As the defense attorney said, some of these terms that they made up were completely made-up terms. You bring a guy in from out of state, you pay him $600 an hour to take a break from his college professor life and try to teach you some term he made in academia. You had an officer of 35 years, a true professional that did this job, sat in that cruiser, hit those houses in drug raids. I'm going to take his opinion every day over an academic. Like the Coy case, like the Meade case, like the Anderson case. Every person in this room knows, whether they want to admit it or not, these were political, malicious indictments by a former rogue prosecutor, Gary Tyack. We should never be here. All this does, it undermines trust. Trust by not only police officers in their government, plus trust by the community they serve. Because of these decisions, our officers are going through these lengthy legal battles, causing taxpayer money, and it's wearing on their families. Officer Grubb acted lawfully, and the verdict reaffirms that. I will continue to stand by any officer doing the right thing, any elected official doing the right thing. I will call out any bad officer, any bad elected official. I want to talk a little bit because you brought up the civil stuff. Any civil rights attorney in this town, I absolutely commend you. I am always here to talk. 6800 Schrock Hill Court, there's a giant sign that says Fraternal Order of Police Brian Steele. I'm easy to find, just Google me. I'll sit down and have a conversation with anybody. What upsets me as a peace officer is the reality. About 90% of our victims in this town, roughly, are of color. Roughly 75% of the known suspects in violent crimes in this town are of color. When one of them are shot, I don't hear anything, right? When the government shoots you, when the police shoot you, when Kroger's involved, it's almost like vultures, right? Looking for deep pockets, looking to sue. I don't care about a fancy suit, a sharp vernacular. I serve the people of Columbus, and I will have a conversation with anybody who wants to help us serve the people of Columbus. With that, I'll take any questions.
What does this verdict do for the morale for the police officers, especially after the Coy trial?
So the number one thing, thank you. I'll leave this right here, appreciate it. Morale already skyrocketed when our former rogue prosecutor did not run. Okay. As of right now, I have a good relationship with our new prosecutor, Shayla Favor. We may not agree on the application of law, and I understand that. I don't expect to agree, but at least there's communication. When we had the conviction a couple weeks ago, or a couple months ago with Coy, we had Miss Favor here giving a press conference and a statement. When I leave here, I'm going to call Madam Prosecutor and I'm going to ask her, do you plan on making a statement? Are you going to make a statement? Whether it is a guilty statement, not guilty, hung jury, the FOP is always committed to standing here and speaking with you and engaging in communication. We'll expect everybody else to.
Since you're an
That's FOP President Brian Steele weighing in on the trial of Blendon Township police officer Connor Grubb. Grubb being found not guilty in the shooting death of Takaya Young. Steele saying that Takaya Young was not a bad person, but made a series of bad decisions. Young was killed in a Kroger parking lot back in 2023. Employees at the store had alleged she had shoplifted alcohol. She was about 6 months pregnant at the time. During the trial, a Kroger employee testified that he approached a Blendon Township officer and said somebody had stolen liquor from the store, and then he pointed to Young's car. The whole thing escalated. It ended with Connor Grubb in front of the car, Takaya Young stepping on the gas, but then Connor Grubb pulling a trigger, killing Takaya Young. We have a team of reporters down at the courthouse right now collecting new information and getting interviews, and you'll hear all of that today on ABC 6 News at noon.